We have the Exodus. Yes. It's a small wave today. It's a little bit smaller, but that's good. Yes. Yes. All right. Bye bye. Yes. Good job. All right. Good job. Okay. So, again, before. Oh, still not happy. Yeah. All righty. So before we get going and I introduce Isaiah to come up again, I would just like to say for those who are tuning in online or for those of you who are here for your first time, I would like to welcome you to Hope Community Fellowship and thank you for coming and joining to worship the Lord with us this morning. And, again, if this is your first time, we'd like to welcome you. If it is not your first time, we would like to thank you for coming and joining us again also. So today, again, we're going to have Isaiah here, continuing in his series that he's doing. So, if you would, please, let's welcome Isaiah back today.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
You can hear me a little better this week. I got a mic now. If at any point you can't hear me, I'm cautious to say this because I know you will, but just say, hey, speak up. Don't be timid or scared to do that. This week is week 2 of our series, Remember the Lord. That is coming out of Deuteronomy 8. If you have your Bible and you want to turn to Deuteronomy 8 real quick. This is our foundational text that we're in for this series. I'm going to open my notes and Bible here too. Before we begin, though, I do just want to say again, this church is unique. I really believe that. I've seen a lot of churches. I've been to a lot of churches. There's something different here. I've got some of my guys with me this morning, and we pulled in. And they were kind of like, "Dude, where are we?" I told them, "Just you wait. Just you wait." Remember the Lord. So, this is your first week here, or as a recap from last week, in Deuteronomy 8, Moses is speaking to the Israelites in these first several chapters of Deuteronomy. He's preparing them for a life in the promised land. Okay, they've been in the wilderness for years. He's preparing them how to live in the promised land. So he gives them the 10 commandments. He gives them more, ways of living. And in chapter 8, if you will go to verse 11, we see a very big warning that he gives. He says, "Take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." So what he's saying is, when you make it, when you're free, when you're rich, when you're living comfortably, do not forget the Lord your God. That is the big commandment here. So last week, what we're doing is we're taking 3 men through the Old Testament. We're in the Old Testament, and we're looking at their lives, and we're going to watch how they overcome an adversity or a challenge, and then we're going to see how they live afterwards. Last week, we covered Gideon, the story of Gideon. Now, Gideon, I was talking to multiple people afterwards, and I didn't realize a lot of people don't know how the story of Gideon ends. In Sunday school or in services, we stop at the victory after the Midianites out of 300. Well, as we go on to see with Gideon, actually, he didn't really get it right towards the end. Gideon had a finish line when he beat the Midianites. I used to be a track and field athlete, believe it or not, and when I crossed that finish line for the last time, I was done running. I said, "I'm finished. Don't need to anymore. There's no purpose in it." Tried running a little bit afterwards, quickly stopped, realized there's no point. Gideon was the same way. He had this finish line that he crossed, and then he kind of backed off. He wasn't as hungry. He wasn't as reverent. And we see that in his story. The people wanted to make Gideon a king. He said, "I'm not going to be your king." But he took their money. He acted like a king. He took many wives. And again, he lived elevated above the people. So we see, again, I know Frank said last week, we have lip service here. God doesn't want your lip service. I don't want to be king, and then I'm going to start living like one. No, words mean nothing if actions don't back them up. And we see that's our big thing again. Words mean nothing if actions don't correlate or correspond with them. And also, something that I got from this story is that it is often more challenging to stack small, consistent wins than to go and get a big one. I like to say consistency over intensity. We learned that from the story of Gideon, too. But this week, we're going to be looking at another man in the Bible. He's probably a little more famous. You've probably heard of him. If you turn to 1 Kings 3, I'll give you time to turn there. We're going to be looking at the life of Solomon. Solomon, son of David. Now, if you haven't heard of Solomon, like I just said, son of David, David is the guy that killed Goliath. Okay, almost all of us has probably heard of David. Solomon is his son. Now, a few things about Solomon. He's the wisest man ever to live, we believe, and we get that from the text here. And he had another big duty. He had a big job. He was supposed to build the temple for the Israelites, for Israel's kingdom. David wanted to build the temple. God said, no, it's going to be Solomon. So that's Solomon's big goal, build the temple. Now, Solomon is a historical figure known for his wealth and his glory. Okay, even secular scholars, secular professors, all these people will agree that Solomon did exist. He was very rich. And again, he represents glory. So if you would have told, again, in Jesus' day, someone, when Jesus refers to Solomon in the New Testament, people think Solomon, they're going to think, wow, that's royalty, that's glory, he's at the top. So again, just a few things to note down while we look at Solomon. So let's take a look. A little bit out of his life, before the wisdom, before all the wealth, and before the fame. In 1 Kings chapter 3. Now Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. Okay, so what happens in this first verse? Solomon goes and he marries Pharaoh's daughter. Okay, now this is a common practice for diplomatic relations. If you want an alliance with someone, if you want peace with another country, you often marry their daughter or a woman in that from that area or that country. Now, because this was a common practice, again, like we saw with Gideon, it was common to have multiple wives. That doesn't mean it's necessarily right or wise. He brings her back to Jerusalem. So we have now a foreign woman into Jerusalem. From the jump, we're beginning to see hints of compromise here. Okay, now it is under the law of Moses, it is technically allowed for Solomon to marry Pharaoh's daughter. It's technically allowed. A few things to note in Deuteronomy 7, verses 3 and 4, God instructs Israelites not to marry inhabitants of the new land they're entering. So they can't marry, the Canaanites or who they're entering. They can't marry, but Egypt isn't forward; they're back. So technically, he can marry Pharaoh's daughter, just not the new inhabitants of the land. That's good to know. Another thing is Deuteronomy 17:17 warns the future king of Israel not to acquire many wives. That may be a little bit of foreshadowing if you know the story of Solomon, but we'll get there. So again, he's technically allowed to have this marriage. That doesn't mean it was wise. I want to hammer that in our brains real quick. Verse 2. The people were sacrificing at the high places, however, because no house had been yet built for the name of the Lord. Okay, so these high places, what were they? They were elevated spots designated for worship, on top of hills. Now, these high places, Israel worshipped at these high places because there was no temple built yet. Okay, so remember, Solomon, I said earlier, had to build the temple. This was important because that was going to be God's dwelling place. That's where they were going to go to worship, seek the Lord. It was very important to get the temple built. But before, they worshipped at high places. They didn't really have much of an option. They were limited. Okay, now here's the catch. These high places were used for pagan worship a lot of the time. Okay? And God set a clear boundary to do not mix with secular or pagan worship. He makes that very clear throughout the Old Testament and in the law. So many of these high places represent spiritually dangerous environments. Israelites may not go there to sin or rebel against God, but it's just, again, similar to marrying Pharaoh's daughter. It's unwise. It's not somewhere you want to be for long. Now they're limited. They don't have much option, but you don't want to, it was never meant to be permanent. They were never meant to permanently be at the high places. Let's move on to verse 3. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and made offerings at the high places. Okay, so we see genuine love from Solomon. He genuinely loves the Lord. This isn't a fake type of, okay, I'm a I'm going to do the right things. I got to get God to bless me. He loved the Lord. We know that Solomon loved the Lord. And again, I know I'm repeating that, but again, we have to he loved the Lord. This is real love. This is genuine love. Okay, but the author also makes an intentional pause here when he says, only he sacrificed and made offerings at the high places. So he loved the Lord, but again, we also pause and recognize the situations that Solomon is in isn't ideal. Okay, let me give you an example. So similar to Pharaoh's daughter, it's not ideal. So we have Solomon who loves the Lord, but he's also in situations that aren't ideal. Again, I'm being very repetitive, I know, but I want you to see and understand this is how compromise starts. When you have two things that are true, that's how compromise begins to form. He loved the Lord, but he was limited. He was in an unideal situation. Let me give you a practical example of this. Again, I've been here for a little bit. I feel like I can take a little more of a half step into the more controversial statements. To me, this is working on Sundays. I don't believe working on Sundays is ideal. Now, when I say that because of the Sabbath. If you take another Sabbath, okay, I think that's fine. But I do think that, again, God makes it clear that the Sabbath is for us. So I understand that it is practical for some people. Some people have to work all days of the week or they have to work on a Sunday. I get that. It's not ideal. But I would be very careful and preserving a Sabbath day for your benefit. So that's just an example of maybe a unideal situation. Again, not wrong, but maybe not ideal. Verse 4. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. So Gibeon was the most significant place of worship in Israel. We see he gives a great sacrifice, thousands of offerings. Okay, this demonstrates Solomon's passion and reverence. Okay, this is a good sign for the people because they have a king that is passionate and reverent towards God. He loves the Lord, but notice, ironically here too, we're still at a high place. Loves the Lord greatly, still unideal. Ideally, we're going to be in a temple, but we're here now. Okay, verse 5. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, ask what I shall give you. So God appears in a dream, and he grants Solomon a request. Now, what's interesting to me is Solomon gets this request not because Solomon deserves it. Okay, we kind of see that from, again, he marries Pharaoh's daughter. Like, he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't manipulate God or earn a favor. God does it because God's gracious. Okay? So, verse 6. And Solomon said, you have shown great and steadfast love to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in faithfulness and righteousness and uprightness and of heart towards you. And you have kept for him this great and steadfast love and have given him a son to sit on the throne this day. Okay, so Solomon praises the Lord. Verse 7, watch this. This has come from Solomon. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of David, my father, although I am but a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. So God offers Solomon a wish in a dream. Might I add, can I pause with the dream part? This is in a dream. I don't know about you, but sometimes my decisions are questionable in a dream. Let me explain. Let me explain there. Has anyone ever accidentally committed a crime in a dream? And neither have I. But let's just say when you're unconscious, that takes another level. Okay. Grand Theft Auto. A couple weeks ago, I woke up. Okay, I woke up in bed. I wasn't in jail. It worked out. But again, just note it. We're in a dream. This is in a dream. He's not conscious. He doesn't have time to talk to people. You're in a dream where it's just you, God, and your heart in this dream, and your subconscious. Okay. So in this dream, Solomon acknowledges that he is ignorant. He doesn't know how to run this kingdom. That's humility. God shows before him, says, what do you want? Solomon acknowledges his weakness. When we pray, how often do we acknowledge what we can't do? Usually it's what can you give me, and not I'm weak here. I need your grace here in this area. Verse 8, and your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too many to be numbered or counted for multitude. So Solomon recognizes the weight and the significance of the position he's in. He's king of Israel, relatively new king. He's the third king. Okay. He's over these people. This is a big position because he's over the people of God and he's leading the people of God. And he understands I'm ill equipped. So, verse 9, give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this, your great people? So, you request for wisdom and discernment to lead and steward the people of God here. Okay, in verse 10, it pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. Lord is pleased. Now, compare this with Gideon. Both give good answers. God says, what do you want? He says, give me wisdom and discernment to lead your people. Good answer. Rewind to last week. The people want to make Gideon king. Gideon says, no, the Lord will be your king. Both good answers. But again, motives matter. We talked about that last week. Solomon meant it and was genuine. Gideon, a little less genuine, right? He took that kingship. So just notice that. Verse 11 to 13, and God said to him, because you have asked this and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or life in your enemies, over your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind. That's what he asked for. So that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you. That's another cool benefit. That's not I'm adding in here. But I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that no other kings shall compare with you all your days. So he asked for wisdom and he asked for discernment. God grants it, says no one will be wiser, no one will have more discernment, and says on top of that, here's money, here's riches. Good day to be Solomon. And if you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days. Now pause here. He says, keep his commandments, and God will extend Solomon's life. Now, God is not concerned with checking boxes. Okay, God is concerned with a surrendered heart. So this is not Solomon missing a day or failing once, and God's up there with a lightning bolt and kills him. That's not how this works. He's worried, or excuse me, I'm trying to get this right. He's worried about a surrendered heart. Okay? Actions do not carry weight to God. They carry weight because they reveal the position of your heart. They don't carry weight just because you're checking a box. That's important to realize with God. So when we do things, motives matter. Okay? For actions reveal what is in our heart. Repeated actions reveal the heart. And God desires the heart. Verse 15, and Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Then he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings and made a feast for all his servants. And he woke up and again sacrificed and had an offering and a feast for the Lord. Now, if you would, turn to chapter 9. A few pages over. You go to chapter 9, look at verse 4. We'll read this real quick. But this is right after Solomon had built the temple. Okay? Right after he built it. This was his goal. This is what he was meant to do. Build the temple. He built it. Now also, this is right before Israel enters their golden age, the peak of their kingdom. This is what God says to him. And as for you, in verse 4, if you will walk before me, as David your father walked, with integrity of heart and uprightness, doing according to all that I have commanded you, and keeping my statutes and my rules, then I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father, saying, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. But, verse 6, if you turn aside from following me, you or your children, and do not keep my commandments and my statutes that I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land that I have given them, and the house that I have consecrated for my name I will cast out of my sight, and Israel will become a proverb and a byword among all peoples. Verse 8, and this house will become a heap of ruins. Everyone passing by it will be astonished and will hiss, and they will say, why has the Lord done this to this land and to this house? Then they will say, because they abandoned the Lord their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt and laid hold on other gods and worshiped them and served them. Therefore, the Lord brought all this disaster on them. That's a little bit extreme. Would anyone agree? That shows how important it is to remember the Lord. That's why Moses said it in Deuteronomy 8. Remember the Lord. Okay, this is important. So again, Solomon just finished building the temple. Right before they enter the top, right before they enter the peak of the kingdom, the Lord appears to Solomon again and tells him this. He warns him again. He puts it in his brain. Now, if we turn the page again, this is where we're going to end up is chapter 11. So we enter the peak years. The nation is united and rich. Okay? Silver is very common. Silver is so common that it has almost no value in the kingdom of Israel. You would not, as if you're walking in the road, you would not bend over to pick up a piece of silver off the ground in the kingdom of Israel. That's how rich this nation was. Okay, travelers would come in to hear Solomon's wisdom from all over the world. The land was at peace. They were stable. They had a strong military. They were good. It seems like they finally made it. After years in the promised land of wandering, we made it here. This seems like the final product. We're good. Solomon goes on to write 3 books of the Bible. Okay, Songs of Solomon. That's a love poem. We almost did a series on Songs of Solomon, but maybe next time. Ecclesiastes teaches the vanity of life without God. And then Proverbs is a collection of general principles of how life works under, the earth and life that God created. So here's the thing about Proverbs. The opening chapters teach the value of wisdom. Solomon is urging his son to pursue wisdom. Pursue it like silver and riches. Wisdom produces life, integrity, discernment, righteousness. He spends these first few chapters just pleading with his son, go pursue wisdom. Here's the benefits of it. Go pursue wisdom. Yet we see a sudden shift in chapters 5 to 7. Solomon here warns about the seduction of folly. Okay? So we just get done talking about how important wisdom is. Now he's immediately going to warn about the seduction of folly. Lust is a primary example here, but again, this could be any other things that pull you away from wisdom. So he spends the first 2 chapters building up how important wisdom is, and then he immediately switches to talk about the things that'll pull you away from wisdom as a warning. So in Proverbs 7, Solomon's the author. He writes about a seductive woman that loves a young man and leads him into sin. And it said, the text in Proverbs 7 says that this young man is like an ox going to the slaughter. Pleasure leads to death. And that's the catch about wisdom. Even though you may have knowledge, that doesn't mean it produces obedience. Okay, let's look at Adam and Eve. They have this whole garden. God says, do not touch that one tree, that one fruit you cannot eat. Adam knew that. Now, Eve was deceived, yes, but when she offered it to Adam, Adam knew. He knew. He knew I shouldn't eat this, but guess what he did? Took a bite, and he entered into the world because of that. Wisdom allows you to know what's right and wrong, but that doesn't mean that you will do what's right or make the right decision. We have to realize that. So Solomon's warning his son, hold on to it, you'll know, but that doesn't mean you'll make the right decision. Like, can anyone relate to that? Paul writes about this in Romans 7, the flesh. We know, but this flesh wants other things. Solomon is warning, he's pleading with his son. When that comes, you have to cling to wisdom. Do not give in to your deceiving heart or your deceiving flesh. Cling to wisdom. William Shakespeare, he was famous. He was known to write 2 types of literature. They were either tragedies or, someone help me out, what was the other one? Comedies. Thank you. I'm going to brush up on my Shakespeare for this. I would say that the story of Solomon seems to be like a tragedy because the wisest man ever to exist didn't take his own advice. He wrote that. He didn't listen to his own advice. And that's where we're going to be at in 1 Kings 11 here as we hit our final text for today. Now, if you read in chapter 10, which we won't, you see Solomon's great wealth. So if you're ever curious, and you can read through starting in verse 14, see how rich he was. It's ridiculous. You wouldn't believe it. It's hard to think that this is a real guy. That's how rich it was. But here we are in verse 1 of chapter 11. Now, King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidon, and Hittite women. Okay, so again, he's loving many foreign women. Notice where it started. Who's the first? Pharaoh's daughter. Now, Pharaoh's daughter, we talked about earlier, that was not wrong under the law of Moses. He was allowed to do that. Okay, but now these other women, these are inhabitants of the land he's entering. God said, no, you can't marry him. But what does he do? He marries them. Watching verse 2, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the people of Israel, you shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clung to these in loves. So what started with an unwise decision from Solomon turned into a compromise. Now Solomon is actively going against the word. So I see it as this middle ground. He starts here in clear obedience. We move here still technically in obedience, but maybe unwise. Now we're in rebellion or sin in verse 2. And notice the word clung. Solomon clung to these in love. So we know Solomon loves God, but he's also loving these foreign women that he shouldn't be with. That's the tension of compromise. Compromise involves two things you usually care about. If you didn't care about them, it wouldn't be compromised. You just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't feel a need to. I've got a good friend, and he wants to lose some weight. He said, wants to lose some weight. And my friend, he loves going to the gym. He runs. He works out. He loves doing it. Okay. He loves food though too. So that's kind of the tension. But see, he's pretty good. So in the apartment, if we ever come in with a pizza or anything, he's pretty good about no, I'm good. I don't need that. Okay. He doesn't care as much about the pizza or the fried chicken. He's good. He can pass on that. But if you bring in a Panda Express or a mention of Panda Express, that's something he holds dearly. He loves it more than he loves the gym. He loves it more than he loves, his fitness goals. There we see a little bit of compromise. Okay, two things he clings to, and he's torn between these two things. Solomon's the same way. Loves the Lord, but now he loves these foreign women. In verse 3, we see he had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away turned away his heart. 700 wives, 300 concubines. And this is easy to look at the Bible and you just see a number, but think about it. 700 wives. 700. I can't find one. He had 700 wives. And sure enough, just like God said, his wives turned away his heart. Verse 4. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods, just like God warned, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. So notice this too. Solomon was old when his wives turned him away. I don't know exactly how old, but he was old. This did not happen overnight. David made a very bad decision in a very short time frame. This is not the case with Solomon. Solomon, it's gradual. He has time. It's not right when he enters the peak of the kingdom, Solomon does something stupid and sins. No, this is gradual. This is compromise. Last week we talked about complacency. This week we're talking about compromise. They're both they fly under the radar. It's not open rebellion, so we often don't see it until we see the effects of it. So years of gradual compromise led Solomon to a divided heart. We see that the text says, his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God. Not wholly. This implies that some of it was, but not wholly. Divided, that's compromise. This is not rebellion, open rebellion, as in going against every word God says. This is compromise. He's trying, but he also loves these women. And it's offensive to God because God doesn't want to run out of room in your heart. He doesn't want a time slot of your week. He wants all of it. And I think, especially in America, we can get that confused sometimes. We talked a little bit last week about, throwing God a favor, maybe. We don't owe God a favor. We owe him our lives. He doesn't want a time slot or a room in your heart. He wants your heart, your entire heart. So again, we have to give him all of it. Surrender it all, not just parts of it. We can't wholly true to it or be divided. We have to give him all of our heart. Verse 5. For when Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites, so Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not wholly follow the Lord as David his father had done. And Solomon built a high place for Chemosh and the abomination of Moab, and for the Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites, on the mountain east of Jerusalem. And so he did all for his foreign wives who made offerings and sacrificed to their gods. So now Solomon is worshiping other fake gods. What started as marrying Pharaoh's daughter, he is now worshiping other pagan gods. Um, just notice this. Notice how the unideal or the unwise turned into sin. I'm going to be vague here. I think we all, if we take a moment to examine, it looks like today's Communion Sunday, we can probably put our finger on areas of compromise. You don't need me to tell you what that is or what that looks like. What I want to do today is I want to try to point you or call to your mind attention past that level of noticing that. I want you to be wary of the areas of unideal and the unwise. It says in Ephesians 5, I think, not to give any foothold to the devil. I want you to be aware of the areas that he could get in. I want you to be aware of the areas that could invite compromise, not dealing with it when it gets there. And when it does get there, again, we can always by grace, repentance. But I want you to focus on the areas that could invite compromise, not the compromise itself. As we'll see in verse, looks like, I believe, 6. Yeah, I lost it. Verse 7, there it is in verse 7. He's at a high place too. So we now see this high place again, as we talked about that in verse 2. It's now in over here, verse 11, chapter 7. It was never meant to be permanent. Solomon's still sticking with these high places of pagan worship. This is, again, it's unwise. The unwise places in his life led to sin. Now, Paul says all things are lawful, not all things are good. That's very true. Because it's allowed does not mean it's wise. I think that's where Christian maturity comes in. Now, I can't make a universal rule because your convictions may be different than my convictions. What's wise to you may not be wise to me. So we have to, again, that's where relationship comes in with God. We have to know for ourselves. But again, be very aware of where compromise could start. Compromise starts with unwise decisions and often escalates. Usually compromise, I believe, rarely just shows up. It almost always escalates. Verse 9, and the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Verse 10, and had commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after other gods, but he did not keep what the Lord commanded. So the Lord was angry because of Solomon's heart. He was angry because his heart turned. He wasn't angry that the commandments weren't kept. He was angry at his heart. Not keeping the commandments, all that did was reveal the condition of his heart. Okay, we have to realize that. The Lord wasn't angry at failure. He was angry at his heart turning. Again, I mentioned last week I went to a rehab facility over in Kentucky. Very, very unique experience for me. Eye-opening. As I spent time with these people, I realized something. I realized that these people who were in this facility for rehab, they love the Lord more than a lot of people I've seen in churches. They're just very aware of their sin and their shortcomings. But again, their heart is turned to God. So because they may fail or relapse or whatever it may be, their heart is still turned to God. And God has grace for that. That's why he had to die on a cross. He has grace for that. But your heart needs to be aligned with him, which with these people that I met, again, it was pretty evident it did. So again, when he didn't keep his commandments, the offense was relational. It was his heart was turned. It wasn't the fact that he just didn't check the boxes with God. The unchecked boxes only pointed to the condition of his heart. So the consequences, as they came, God raises adversaries, and they rise against Solomon and his kingdom. Solomon dies, and the kingdom splits. It enters the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And soon after, both are conquered. The northern kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom was later conquered by the Persians first, I believe. But they were conquered. Sure, everything God said in verse 9 happened. You don't want to test God. If God says it, it'll come. And sure enough, it did. So the entire kingdom and generations after Solomon suffered because of one man's compromise. And it wasn't one man's quick decision of sin. It was one man's compromise that led to all this. So many suffered because of Solomon's compromise. There were consequences that went far beyond Solomon for his compromise. Same thing's true today. Your compromise could affect the lives of many others, not just you, as well as you. That's why it's so important to deal with it. And I think that's, especially in America, one of the biggest lies we face. It's that we can be in the middle ground. We can have feet in both sides of the yard or fence. No, we have to be fully surrendered to God. Compromise always has consequences. Like complacency, again, it flies under the radar a lot of times. So this morning, examine for compromise. You need to take care of that. There's always grace. But also examine for the unwise. Pray about it this week. See, God, where am I in situations that could lead to compromise? Be aware of that. Again, I understand that sometimes situations are unideal, we're limited, but just be aware, be mindful of it. And that's kind of our sermon for today. Now, next week, I understand that these first 2 weeks have been a little more confrontational, talking about Gideon's complacency, Solomon's compromise. Next week, we'll end on a little higher note. All right, we'll get I don't want to say a better example, but I will say that, a better example of a guy, how he lived and how he successfully remembered the Lord. But we're going to pray, and then it looks like communion. God, thank you for today. Thank you for these people. Thank you for America's 250th year of independence. Help us to go out and, yes, be a light, spread the gospel, but help us to, in our own lives, evaluate ourselves. Help us to find areas of, if we have compromise, help us to deal with that and, again, recognize it, but also help us to be mindful of areas that could lead to compromise this week. With us, and Jen, thank you for your word and for being God, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.